Hi, this is Rahman Sheikh. Welcome to Fortnightly Railway Transportation Systems podcast. I am the host and railway systems specialist. This podcast is primarily focused on railway experts who have vast amount of experience and contributed greatly to this amazing industry. This is not a technical seminar but focuses on feel good stories, individual journeys, their success and failures, motivating younger generation to kickstart their career in railways and creating a sense of pride for the railway people who devoted their lives on the most environment friendly public transportation. Today, we are joined by Lloyd D'Cruz, Program Director for Sydney Metro Integration at Sydney Trains. With over 15 years of experience in the rail industry, Lloyd has played a pivotal role in shaping rail infrastructure projects that define Sydney's public transportation landscape. He has held key positions in notable programs such as More Trains, More Services initiative and is now spearheading integration efforts for Sydney Metro. Lloyd's expertise spans strategic program management, stakeholder engagement, and governance, skills that have been critical in executing high profile, multi billion dollar projects that aim to enhance capacity, reliability, and accessibility for commuters across New South Wales. Hi, Lloyd. Welcome
Hi,
to the
Rahman.
pod.
Thank you very much. It's been an honor to have to be on this, and I look forward to sharing some of my learnings. It's funny you say 15 plus years, right? It just feels that it's gone so quickly. But thank you for having me on here.
Yeah, let's do it. I lined up around 13 to 14 questions, so I'll try to be quick in my questioning and I will give the stadium to you. So it's you all the time. So let's start with my first question. Could you share an overview of your role as Program Director for Sydney Metro Integration and what it entails on a day-to-day basis?
So the role and the team were set up in Sydney Train to sort of coordinate and facilitate the introduction of Sydney Metro and its integration with Sydney Trains. So the scope revolved around the city section of the Metro, the Southwest Metro, but also the Western Sydney Airport, where we had the interaction at St. Mary's, and also Western Sydney or Metro West, where we've got some interfaces at Westmead Station and North Strathfield Station. It's a very interesting role, to be honest, and it's very unique. And that's what excites me as part of this role, because it varies in script from a day to day. No 2 days are the same. If I can give you the two bookends of a day, one day I'm at Sydney Central Station trying to understand what defects are there from a heavy downpour of rain, because we're trying to understand where the leaks are coming from, to getting ready for truncation of the 150-year-old Sydenham to Bankstown line, where we had the CE and the ministers coming through. So yeah, it's very different day to day, as you can, but it's very exciting, and that's what I like about a role when it's your no 2 days are the same, and that's how I enjoy the program.
Great. I know, Lloyd, personally, you love challenges. So, my next question is on challenge. As you know, Sydney Metro is one of the most significant transport projects in Australia. What are those some unique challenges you face in integrating it with Sydney Trains, the existing infrastructure?
In a design of a new line, and the Sydney Metro program already had experience converting the Epping to Chatswood rail link. There's a lot of planning that needs to take place, right, to ensure that there's no overlap or minimum overlap with existing infrastructure, because it's a new technology, it's a new rolling stock. So the aim is always to ensure that there's minimum overlap. However, we could not avoid this for a station like Central Station. Central Station is our biggest station, and it was absolutely important to have a metro network at Central. There was massive challenges, and I was quite new to the project, but trying to understand and speak to the project directors on the Sydney Metro end, and the challenges they faced was enormous. The challenge also included, if I could talk about Central Station, if we can sort of focus our purview on Central Station, it was the defect process and the defect management process post handover of stations. Now, project management, people love the big things, let's do the big station, let's hand over, but sometimes people forget the maintenance side of things. And part of Sydney Trains, my remit was to make sure we are accepting an asset that was maintainable, was ensuring there was minimum defects. There's always going to be defects, but ensuring there's minimum defects. One of the challenges, if I may put to you, is we had the shunters, and for non-railway users, I'm hoping there'll be some definition of shunters on Google, but we had a group of shunters that had permanent location in Sydney Trains, but because of the metro project, they had to be relocated into another part of the project, and that was sort of a temporary accommodation. Now, nobody likes to be in temporary accommodation, right? Whether it's in a personal or in a professional scenario. But they were in that temporary accommodation for quite a number of years. Now, once the project was wrapping up, along with the defects, we had to make sure that we send them or provide them back a permanent home, because it was not fair on us to keep them in a temporary facility. So working with these projects post the big opening was still important because the project was still going on, and ensuring that we were able to move the shunters back into their permanent location was a massive challenge. Yes, not as big as creating a new metro, but it was a big challenge from a Sydney Trains perspective, because we're in an industrial environment. We needed to make sure we are looking after our staff post handover of these projects. So if I look at central stations, it's the defects, but it's also the challenges of bringing people back into role so that they can maintain this for another 100 years, I guess. So yeah, that was a big one for central station.
Great insights, Lloyd. It's not just the system, it's also about the people. All our projects are at the end, it's for the people. So let's go to your previous project, which I lightly introduced. How does your previous work on More Trains, More Services program inform your approach to Sydney Metro integration?
Even though the scope of the programs were quite different, so if I may encapsulate the scope of More Trains, More Service in a single line, it was about introducing a new timetable into the railway. And I talk about it very simplistically, but timetable for any railway, it's its main product. Whereas you had Sydney Metro, where it was a lot more infrastructure based and a lot more readiness of frontline. But I guess the commonality between the two, Rayman, was the operational integration approach that I took with the teams when I was at More Trains, More Service and Sydney Metro. And operational integration encompasses operational readiness, maintenance readiness, human factors, and change management. And change management and transformation is a big piece when you're introducing these big infrastructure projects. And one of the things I had to do with the team was ensuring our customers, and when I say customers, our internal customers, so our operational staff, our customer staff on stations. As you know, Central Station, now with more people coming in with the metro, we needed to make sure because the customers don't really care if they're a metro line, or if they see someone, they're going to ask the question. So how are we going to make our customers ready to answer those questions? So that was very important. And operational integration is key to ensure we had that laser focus, right? We needed to have that laser focus so that staff were ready before the metro came on board, and to ensure they had all the information they had to answer questions to customers. So I think if I may tie that link, I think it was the operational integration that tied the two programs together.
Wow, what insights. Great wisdom. Thanks once again to come on this pod, Lloyd. You are sharing brilliant. It's
Thank
gold
you.
dust. With a background in strategic planning and program governance, how do you ensure the alignment of project objectives across multiple stakeholders?
So the stakeholder list on metro programs, as you can imagine, is vast. Completely. If I look at, there's internal stakeholders within Sydney Trains, we had external stakeholders within Sydney Metro, and also the teams delivering to Sydney Metro. For me, to ensure that there were clear lines of communication, it's not just communication, and me stepping into the role was immediately to establish trust as well, because we were about 9 months from the initial opening of the city section and about a year from the truncation of the Sydenham to Bankstown line. So it was really important for the communication to be adept, but also the trust to be. For me, it was important to have that level, having a counterpart in Sydney Metro, because you cannot deal with 10,000 stakeholders or 100 stakeholders on a daily basis. It's just physically not possible. So you need to make sure who is your right sponsor on the other side of the organization. It's very important to establish that and establish that working relationship with them. That allowed me to then ensure I pass escalations well before any governance forums. The last thing I want to do is set up any project director or any project manager at a governance governance forum who, with an escalation they haven't heard of. That is not good practice. That is not good stakeholder management. That is not good project management. So having that sponsor inside the organization on the opposing organization was important. And again, the other way around as well. That person would call me and inform me that, hey, we've got this issue. Is that something we can solve between the two of us? If not, then let's get it to a point where we brief our execs and then it's resolved at a different forum. And the program also had very structured governance forums, and that was linked between both organizations in Sydney Trains and Sydney Metros, which allowed resolution of these escalated items. You had different forums, again, looking at the operational readiness. We had different forums between Sydney Trains, Sydney Metro, and also bringing in the private operator just before go live was important. But it's important to have those multiple levels, but having that strong link at one level to ensure common language is used. The last thing you want to do is use different language, because that's where in a complex program like this, things can go south very quickly.
Do you as Sydney Trains engage with Sydney Metro operator, which is NTS as well, and ARTC?
So as an operator, we needed to make sure we had what is called as a safety interface agreement, and that is a requirement by the Rail Safety National Regulator that we have a document in place between two operators. We had that one for the Northwest, and we had to update that one for the city section, and now we'll do that for the Southwest section. So it was key that two operators talk to each other as well, along with Sydney Metro, because they are the key party in this program of works. So so the stakeholders, it was vast, but again, common messaging, very important. Don't mix the message. Ensure that if you're escalating something, you've exhausted all options first before you're escalating, because sometimes execs have very little time and you're going to them for a decision rather than a discussion.
Yeah, I think listening to you, I get that Sydney Metro integration project must also handle substantial budgets and resources. What are some strategies you used for effective financial management in such large-scale programs?
So my remit from a financial governance perspective was sort of, if I could split it into two streams. One looked at the interface team or labor of about 80 FTEs across Sydney Trains, working with Metro and their different contractors. The other stream was what we coined as self-performing works, where we needed to ensure that the scope of the program, there's a bit of scope that can't be delivered by the contractor because it is held by Sydney Trains, and Sydney Trains are the best party to deliver that scope. So that's sort of infrastructure pieces of work, and we had the labor piece of work. The strategy that worked well for me was I had a group of senior program managers who had their few of them looking at interface works, some of them looking at operational integration, and then looking at enabling works. Sydney Trains, as other companies, has a finance regime that they need to do at the start of each month. So in order to make it very efficient, meeting the senior program managers in the first week, ensuring that their forecast is accurate. If it's not, how do you talk about rebaselining and being proactive? Because in terms of when it comes to labor, I was very, very harsh, if I may put it, on my senior program managers, because labor is something we can control. This is something in our control. And if you have a variance more than 5 or 10% when you're doing labor, you're not doing good project management, right? If it's an infrastructure piece of work, yes, there could be some points where you get a vendor invoice a bit late than you anticipated, and hence your actuals and your forecast don't align. But when it comes to labor, I had to be, again, I used the word laser focus before. I had to ensure the team reaches between 5 and 10% variance. It was tough when I took over the team, but when we started putting some practices in place, and we were able to achieve that. So it's we need to make sure that all this money we're working on is public money. So we need to have proper financial governance on everything we spend.
Great insights, Lloyd, and I do believe in your leadership style. And I strongly believe that we can't sell ice creams every time. Sometimes you need to have that.
That's right. We need to have some sour candies in the mix.
Now, when I see your profile, I saw that constructability is listed as one of your core skills. So could you explain how you approach this aspect in the context of complex rail integration projects?
This sort of skill, when I was thinking about this, when I was building up my LinkedIn profile, and I put this in because this sort of helped me both in a personal and a professional space. And it sort of came about not in transport, but when I was working for Deloitte, I did some work for the logistic branch for the Air Force and sort of helping them out in their project. I can't dive down into what the project was, but that sort of honed in that part of skill, which I did not know that, because interestingly, similar to you, Rahman, coming from a rail background, you've got your signaling, your control systems, and your civils, but that whole constructability aspect, sort of when I had a purview into the defense space, in a personal space, and I'll sort of tie these two together. A few years ago, when I was planning the knockdown rebuild of my house, I sort of took a system engineering methodology, to sort of write requirements, and my builder was very surprised because he had never seen anything like this. Writing requirements, able to verify and validate those requirements, but also from a materiality perspective in choosing what materials, why you're choosing those materials in terms of, pulling a house or integrating the whole house together. This sort of came up in the metro project when we were looking at a piece of project at Central Station. So some of the ceiling tiles at Central Station had to be removed for Sydney Metro to pass through their utilities, the viaducts and things of that sort. But because the asset was that old, we couldn't put that back. We couldn't put those product back. But because of the experience I had gained in defense, but also my personal experience, I knew from an architectural perspective what it takes to integrate new products back. Yes, it's not the same one, but at least it's a like for like. But also from a materiality, I've gone through so many ColourBond brochures that it was coming out of my ears. But talking to people in the engineering community in Sydney Trains and putting these products forward, and that's not typical engineering. It's not what I've done from a railway perspective, but because of that experience I had, I was able to contribute, right? Able to contribute, even though my role as a project director was to ensure it happened. I was almost very excited to be able to contribute and ensure we had a good solution for Central, which we are. We've only got one part of Central to be done, and we're all done. So it's interesting how you pick up these side shoot skills, I guess. But yeah, look, if I was to tell my younger self, look out for these skills, right? Because you when you're in an industry, you will be hit by skills left, right, and center. Just grab everything and take it along.
Wow, what a great fusion of two different industries. Now we spoke a lot about collaboration, coordination, technical stuff, interface. Let's do some admin type of questions. People don't notice, but the major portion of our time goes in admin work as well. How has hybrid work influenced the way you manage and coordinate teams for the integration?
Okay, I'll start this answer by taking us back to sort of the initial when the pandemic sort of hit. I was leading this project in the Rail Operations Center, and one of the team members had a chat to me because he had an elderly mother-in-law that lived with him, and he was wondering if he could sort of work from home because the last thing he wanted to do was get infected in the office and take that back. So for me, leadership is something you need to act on. You don't wait for permission. So I just, even before it was mandated, I told the team we work from home now, and to ensure we had a philosophy of how can we be outcome driven, right? We need to be outcome driven, not just bums on seats. We've got to be outcome driven. So we set up a daily check-in, 15 minutes, to ensure we knew, what task we were doing. And that sort of empowered people. And Rahman, this was a mix of not just permanent employees. It was a mix of contractor and permanent employees. But the camaraderie that we had built, was amazing because you put trust into the team, which ensures they would give back, to that organization. Now, on the Metro program, if I can now bring it back to present day, ensuring alignment, because I've got senior program managers working on different parts of the program and different Metro programs. And alignment is not easy when you're not in the office every day and we're not around the corner when you can go and ask them a question. So having a weekly alignment meeting was very important because then you understand what my priorities were, if I was getting anything down from the execs, but I was taking information back because information in an organization always flows bottom up. So ability to collect this information, but also ensure what their priorities are was important. And it becomes part and parcel of hybrid working. And I think if you don't have that trust amongst your team, you can even be in the office every day and it'll still be a slight struggle. So having that trust is quite important.
Well, great, not just technical, but a great people leader, Lloyd. People are lucky to have you as their leader. And from your perspective, what are some of the most important factors for a successful integration between legal rail systems and new metro technology?
That's a great question, and I think as a rail fraternity, we're facing this question across not only in Australia and I think overseas. How do we keep an existing railway running while implementing and introducing new technology? It's a classic challenge I think we face. In my view, I think integration success depends, yes, on the technology, but also on the people side of things. For the metro integration, it was key for us to ensure that the frontline staff, and I mentioned this previously, we're familiar with the people and the processes of the metro operators and sort of vice versa. So what we did on the metro project to ensure we sort of got success in that area is we ran a number of day in life of activities or scenarios or use cases where we got real life scenarios on what would happen on a railway and especially on stations that are combined with Sydney Trains and Metro. And we actually invited our frontline staff from Sydney Trains, but also frontline staff from the Metro operator, and actually working together to say, how would you solve this? And because we did this in readiness for the opening, you could see the camaraderie building. You can see the relationships building even before the first train pulled in. So it was important to start doing that overlap on the technology, but also on the people side of things. Because rail fraternity is a small group. And a lot of times, a lot of people know each other. So the people element is quite important as well.
Great answer, Lloyd. Now, in your role as a director, at a director level, I know you have to deal with a lot of negotiations in your day-to-day job. So what are some key consideration when negotiating between government, contractors and stakeholders for projects of this scale?
I was quite lucky early in my career to attend one of the best courses I did was on influencing and negotiating. And the thing I learned in that course was, regardless of what you're negotiating, always try, and it has to be a genuine intent, right? It has to be a genuine intent of reaching a win-win outcome, not profit, not hurting the other party, a genuine intent of reaching a win-win outcome. Now, this is easier said than done because different organizations have different pressures and everyone's trying to get one better than the other. But I'll preface by saying you need to have that intent to reach that win-win outcome. So in order to get that, the key is building good relationships, right? It's important to build good relationships regardless of what you're trying to achieve. Do not build a relationship because you want to achieve a short-term outcome. You've got to build relationships for the sake of building relationships. Again, as I said before, this community is very small and you need to make sure you build good relationships. So we've had massive debates, as you can understand, on Metro when money is an issue, or scope, or even there is a lot of asset vesting that happens between Tahi and Sydney Metro because Sydney Metro takes over some of the land. There's a lot of discussion that happens. So if you don't have good relationships, it's hard to get the outcome you're after. So in any negotiation, I think for me, I always rely on my relationships, and my intent is always to get that win-win outcome.
Beautiful. And there's a linked question. Negotiations is key for innovation. So can you tell me any specific innovation or new technologies that you are implementing within the integration project to enhance efficiency or safety?
So one of the things we did as part of the Sydney Metro opening was we looked at one of these technologies, the Bluetooth technology to counting people, right? People counting technologies. It was used on some of the Sydney trains for New Year's Eve to count and see how many. So with the team, we said, why don't we use this at Sydney trains stations that interface with Metro, so we can get a sense of, yes, we've got the Opal data, but sometimes we can't see in real time, how people are moving from the Metro side of the station to the Sydney train side of the station. So that real time information, Opal wouldn't have. So we implemented some Bluetooth sensors at Wynyard. We did that at Central Station, at Sydenham, Chatswood, all the interface stations. And we were starting to see some really, really good, information coming through. But the exciting bit was on day one, 19th August, I won't forget that day, 19th August of 2024, when the Metro went live. I was on the first train from Tallawong. I took the 4:38 train from Tallawong to Sydenham. On the way back, I stopped at the Rail Operations Centre. The Rail Operations Centre, as you know, has a control room floor where you've got the train controllers and the network controllers. And I went down and I looked at, we had installed the dashboard on one of the desks, and it was exciting to see the person looking at it said, this is brilliant, because we had given them two information sources. One was the train running information of the metro, but one was Bluetooth information. And he said, the train running information is good, but this Bluetooth is brilliant because clearly I can see 500 people have gone from platform 5 at Epping and they're going up to platform 2. So that, which means going up from platform 5 metro to platform 2 Sydney trains. And I know if I've got a train plan that's going to skip Epping, I'm going to say, no, we got to pick up Epping because you've got 500 people coming on. So it was to see, because you think about Bluetooth and people counting and things of that sort. It's great, right? But what is data if it can't be used as information, right? Not much.
Beautiful.
So yes, that was quite exciting.
Wow, goosebumps. I love technology. Wow. Next question. What have been some of the most rewarding aspects of your work in transforming Sydney's rail network, particularly through high impact projects like Sydney Metro integration?
I think this program for me has been an absolutely incredible opportunity, and to play a small part, in a historical project like Metro has been brilliant. I've been very fortunate in my career to have some really good internal metros and mentors and external mentors. And one of my mentors told me that will stick with me for my career. He said, "You're inside the bubble of one of the biggest projects, in Australia, and not many people will see what happens inside that juggernaut of a project." And now, if I look back, I know exactly what he was trying to say, because there are certain things that you've done in a program that is quite brilliant. And also, for me personally and professionally, this program has been good. I live on the metro line, so to be able to take a metro and go to work, saving 20 minutes of my time is so good. It's so good. So it's both a definitely a professional reward, but a good personal tick as well.
So looking forward, what developments or trends do you think will shape the future of rail infrastructure and integration projects in Australia?
I think from a technology perspective, and also I was listening to your conversation with Ibrahim, which was a brilliant conversation. It's clear what we're seeing on the eastern seaboard. I think the focus is going to be on European technology from a suburban and sort of freight railway, and more a communication-based for metro-style applications like what's happening in Sydney. I guess having technology inside the cab or inside the train allows us to move to a simpler infrastructure. And I think there will be a lot of benefits for maintenance, but also increase services and on some lines. And I don't think New South Wales, we got to a population yet like a Hong Kong where you need to have trains running, with very little downtime, but we never know. We build infrastructure not for 10 years, but for 50 years. So having that hindsight is quite important. And we've got diverse networks across the country. So from an integration perspective, it's key that we choose similar technologies, but also open out to different vendors. I think because there's some shortage in critical skills across the rail industry, whether it be from project managers to subject matter experts and maintainers. We've got a shortage because rail projects are in boom across the world. So to get not everyone can have the top ETCS expert on their program, right? So we need to ensure we've got that succession planning in place, and that way I think if we've got that technology roadmap in place and we've got a key plan for upskilling people, I think the rail in Australia will be in a good place.
Wow, great advice. I think succession plan and competency development, and we're talking about rail. So is there any career advice would you like to share with our listeners,
So,
Lloyd?
when I finished uni, I had two job offers. One was from a SCADA company and one was from a railway company. And because I loved rail, trains, growing up, I mean, who doesn't, right? I chose the rail part. And I think it's an absolute exciting career to be part of. So if anybody listening out there is on a doorstep of choosing a career, choose rail. You can do anything you want to. You can be a project manager. You can be a train controller. You can drive a train. You can do frontline stuff. If it's technology, you can look at. There's a lot of movement of artificial intelligence and cybersecurity coming into the rail space. So there's something for everyone in the rail space. I am biased, and I admit it to be biased, but it's an absolute fantastic career, and I don't think I'll. I don't think I'll do anything else other than being in the transport industry because I've enjoyed myself so far. You said in your intro, over 15 years. I just don't know where it's gone because I've enjoyed myself on this journey.
You were in a flow state. It was amazing talking to you, Lloyd, and thank you very much for coming onto this pod and sharing your insights with
Thank you,
us.
Rahman. Thank you for having me as a guest. Absolutely enjoyed it. Thank you.
I believe everyone listening to this podcast has got something to take away from today's discussion. If you like this podcast, please listen, follow, and share this podcast within your network. If you believe we should be sharing your story or someone within your network, there is a railway leader who should be here sharing his or her contribution to this industry, contact me on railway transportation systems at gmail.com. Thank you for your time today. Stay safe and take care of yourself.